Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in traditional conversations about personal finance for entertaining conversations about money and millennials. And we promise you don't have to jump out of a moving car to prove you love us. Just hit subscribe.
Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money again, where Malcolm is now bringing in the show, sir. Good job on the introduction.
Yeah, you know, I'm a man of many talents.
Indeed, indeed. How is everything going, man?
All good, man. It's, I'll be glad when this long weekend everybody keeps promising me finally gets here.
It's on the way, and you're talking about Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day
is that
weekend,
it?
Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. Well, this is another episode of Manage Your Damn Money, where, as Malcolm said, we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money. I want to preview the conversation at hand for this episode. Is Bitcoin BS? A cryptocurrency enthusiast debates Manage Your Damn Money. We have a guest on this show. He goes by the name of Samson Williams. He's a partner at Axes and Eggs, a blockchain and cryptocurrency think tank, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, Malcolm. But before that, interesting little note that I came across, Tristan Walker, who's the founder of Walker & Company, he posted something on Instagram which said that tech company leaders like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates all limit like their kids' intake of online stuff.
I've read that too.
Did you see that?
I've read that over the last year and a half, where all of a sudden people are starting to say this thing that I created for you guys to get addicted to.
Right.
Smoking may cause cancer, so my kids don't smoke. But I'm a big tobacco executive.
Right.
That's essentially what it all of a sudden everybody's having this coming to Jesus moment. Right. I'm like, come on, dude.
It's interesting because I feel like we're in a moment where the internet is now bad. Where it used to be good, there's all these bad things that happen on the internet now.
Not even necessarily the internet, but social media specifically.
That's true.
Like, social media was designed, at least supposedly, designed as a place for us to gather with our friends. Think AOL Instant Messenger, right?
Right.
Where you're supposed to gather with your friends, have casual conversation about things that space and time is no barrier, right? And then all of a sudden it became this place where people took pleasure in causing disruption, and causing chaos. Like, I can't make a single post on our page, for example, about just money without somebody in my mentions talking about something completely unrelated, like calling me a liberal or what are you talking about?
It's interesting. The thing that Tristan posted in particular was Bill Gates' kids have to use a computer that's in the kitchen, and that's all that they have available to them.
Because that's what Bill Gates grew up with.
Right.
Like, in my house, we had one computer.
Right.
It had a dial-up internet connection.
Right.
Somebody couldn't even talk on the phone if you were going to get on the computer.
Absolutely.
So I can't say that's exactly what my kids will have, but it'll ring eerily similar, I promise.
Very good, very good. Well, as we do on every show on Manage Your Damn Money, it is now time for headlines. In about 20 years, Malcolm, half the population will live in 8 states. And this was a July 2018 piece on thewashingtonpost.com by Philip Bump. The American Enterprise Institute's Norman Orstein offered a stunning bit of data on Twitter. He said, quote unquote, "I want to repeat a statistic I use in every talk. By 2040 or so, 70% of Americans will live in 15 states, meaning 30% will choose 70 senators. And 30% will be older, whiter, more rural, more male than the 70%. Unsettling, to say the least." And that was the quote from Mr. Orstein. In broad strokes, the article says Orstein is correct. The Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service of the University of Virginia analyzed Census Bureau population projections to estimate each state's likely population in 2040, including the expected breakdown of populations by age and gender. Although that data was released in 2016, before the Bureau revised its estimates for coming decades, we see that, in fact, the population will be heavily centered in a few states. And Malcolm, I think just in our own lives, we know that the people that we know all live in a handful of states, right?
I think it's 1 in every 6 people right now lives in New York, LA, New York, California, or DC.
Right.
That is amazing. That proves that trend you're talking about is absolutely possible.
Absolutely. And the article went on to say 8 states will have just under half of the total population of the country, 49.5% according to the Weldon Cooper Center's estimate. The next 8 most populous states will account for additional fifth of the population, up to 69.2%, meaning that 16 of the most populous states will be home to about 70% of Americans, and there are 51 states plus the District of Columbia. Do I have that right?
It's 50.
50, all right.
DC would make 51.
So there we go. Thank you.
I'm going to talk to your high school geography teacher.
Well, the joke's on you because I didn't take geography in high school. So,
clearly. But so the one thing that I will say is unlikely, though, is before all of that happens, DC still won't be a state. Right. So what we're talking about is null and void.
Indeed.
No taxation, no representation is the mantra that DC's been chanting for like 30 years, my whole life.
Right.
They still have no representation,
statehood,
but full taxation. Right. So it's going to stay that way.
Indeed. And then finally, Ornstein and Waldman's point is clear. 30% of the population of the country will control 68% of the seats in the U.S. Senate, or more starkly, half of the population of the country will control 84% of those seats. This is a major shift in demographics that we've seen. Obviously has implications for our politics. Is this something that you think lawmakers should be concerned about?
Yes and no. So I definitely see how this hypothesis could come to fruition, but I think the part that people might be missing is the fact that folks our age are running away in droves from these places that you just listed, because of how ridiculous the cost of living is.
Right.
So folks move to a DC or a New York or California or wherever, deal with the high cost of living for 2, 3, 5 years while they're in their 20s and life is fun.
Right.
But the moment they have that one kid that all of a sudden flips their world upside down.
Oh man, gotta move to Dallas, Texas.
They're moving to St. Paul, Minnesota, Austin, Texas, Memphis, Tennessee, all these other places that, to your point, normally they would have one senator for like 5 residents in the whole state, where now you're seeing younger people moving to those places, and they're causing this geographical shift from real estate developers that are like, well, I'm going where they're going.
Right.
So now all of a sudden, Minnesota has a couple major metropolitan areas.
Right.
All of a sudden, Tennessee's got a couple major metropolitan. So I think, it's easy to look at it and say, because of the way things have been for the last 50 years, this is where people will probably populate.
Absolutely.
But I think we're, once again, millennials ruin everything, right? I think we're ruining that trend that we're going to end up being the people who populate middle America.
So do you really see a reverse trend happening? Because most of the quote unquote good jobs are in coastal, it's the big cities that we talk about, LA, New York, DC. Do you in an America where, manufacturing is less and less of a thing that people can do for their entire career, are people going to move back to places that are less populous and obviously less and fewer jobs?
Those quote unquote good jobs that you're talking about, the real good jobs out there allow for work from home capabilities.
Okay.
So what difference does it make if I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and my employer is in San Francisco?
Right.
If I have Wi-Fi access, I've got my security codes, and that I really exist. Like, there's people I know, friends of mine, who work for an employer that they've never actually been to their home office.
Wow.
They got hired virtually. Wow. They work virtually. They have meetings virtually, and they probably will never set foot wherever the company is actually located. So that's a trend also that lends itself to us being able to kind of shirk the $5,000 a month, 1,000 square foot apartment in New York for.
So in short, you see this balancing back out.
I do. I see. New York's always going to be New York. Right. LA's always going to be LA. Right. But I think you're going to see more and more people who that doesn't mean as much to them. Okay. So unless I want to be a Wall Street banker or a movie star, what do I care?
Right.
And I think, like you said, it kind of balances itself out. I don't think it goes lopsided in one direction versus the other. I think it just kind of becomes a little less densely populated in those areas.
Well, hopefully that's right, because then that'll keep balance in the body of government that's supposed to keep everything in order. But before we go to a music break, I want to remind people that you can always catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and also on any of those platforms. Leave us a review, please. Tell us how great of a job we're doing. That helps other people catch the show. If you have a question for us or you want us to cover a particular topic, send your question to info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can also catch us on social media, Legram, and on Twitter. Malcolm, what's your handle?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, mine is at MYDM1. You can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We're on this episode of MYDM. We have an interesting conversation at hand. A simple question. Is Bitcoin BS? A cryptocurrency enthusiast debates MYDM. This time last year, Malcolm and I were hearing from a specific set of associates that Bitcoin, Litecoin, and other cryptocurrencies were all the rage in the future, they said, of how business is done in America. There was one problem. They couldn't explain what these cryptocurrencies were or how they worked. Given the hype and our penchant for being old men shaking our fists from the porch, we decided not to give cryptocurrencies too much time on our show. Today, that unofficial embargo is coming to an end, and we will take our first deep dive into the topic. And we have a guest on this show who we will introduce after the next music break. But first of all, I want to clarify what inspired this show and what made me say, let's do this show. Aside from our guests who we'll have on, it was an Instagram post in particular by the Financial Times, and the post read, "The cryptocurrency bubble has burst. Bitcoin, the original and most valuable cryptocurrency, has plummeted from $19,000 value in December to bump along at between $6,000 and $8,000 range since June," and that's June of 2018. And it's not just Bitcoin. In January, the total market capitalization of cryptocurrencies had climbed beyond $800 billion, up from just $18 billion a year earlier, according to data provider CoinMarketCap. Now the market has lost 3/4 of its value to stand at $200 billion, Malcolm, which is a huge loss in value for the whole space.
I had $0.0075 suddenly missing tomorrow.
Right.
That's devastating.
Right.
If you think about it in those terms.
Indeed it is. And real quick, just so we're on the same footing for everybody, real quick definition for everyone. Cryptocurrency is defined by Investopedia.com as a digital or virtual currency that uses cryptography for security. A cryptocurrency is difficult to counterfeit because this is the security feature. A defining feature of cryptocurrency, and arguably its most enduring allure, is its organic nature. It is not issued by a central authority, rendering it, and I put in bold, theoretically, immune to government interference or manipulation. Then also we asked the question, is Bitcoin BS? Because Bitcoin is like the grandfather, so to speak, of all cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is defined by also Investopedia.com. Bitcoin is a digital currency created in 2009. It follows the ideas set out in a white paper by the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto, whose true identity has yet to be verified. Bitcoin offers the promise of lower transaction fees than traditional online payment mechanisms and is operated by a decentralized authority, unlike government-issued currencies. There are no physical Bitcoins, only balances kept on a public ledger in the cloud that, along with Bitcoin transactions, is verified by massive amounts of computing power. Bitcoins are not issued or backed by any banks or governments, nor are they individual Bitcoins valuable as a commodity. Despite it not being ledger tender, Bitcoin charts high on popularity and has triggered the launch of other virtual currencies collectively referred to as altcoins. Malcolm, so what was your very first introduction to the concept of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies?
The government crackdowns on Bitcoin being used to buy and sell drugs online.
Okay.
I think Silk Road was the term they used for this outfit.
It was like the black market of
drugs.
Right.
Like for 2 or 3 years, people were successfully buying and selling all illegal drugs online using Bitcoin as the means for transferring money back and forth between them.
Right.
And that was when I first heard about it. Like some news outlet broke it open, quote unquote, and live at 9. What are your kids doing with that Bitcoin that they have?
They're on Silk Road.
Right. That was not a great introduction to the world.
Sure. Right? So it's interesting. I think my introduction to it was where we used to do our old show, and folks telling us like, "You got to get in, Malcolm," as we've said in the past. So did you think it was like a scam when you first like delved into it a little bit? Like, what did you think about it?
When I first heard about it, I didn't think it was a scam, but I thought it was going to be a means of doing illegal business without being able to be tracked by the federal government.
Right.
Which seemed to me like a plausible use of the cryptocurrency because it had a even dark evil genius name, cryptocurrency. Like it just sounded like something that a James Bond villain would use to buy his drinks at the bar. Like sounded perfect.
You must accept crypto.
Yeah, like like so that was what I thought it was always going to be used for.
Right.
And then all of a sudden people tried to legitimize it and say, no, we're not just using it for that. Right. We're also using it for legal purposes. And eventually the world is going to realize that we're all smart and they're all dumb. Right. And it's going to be too late. We're going to have all the money in Bitcoin and you're not going to be able to breathe.
Right.
And then, it became that. And then all of a sudden it became people who were at least semi-smart say, well, wait a minute, this whole blockchain technology that you guys are using to create this cryptocurrency and actually bat it back and forth between yourselves on this distributed ledger, that's actually the technology. Right. I'll invest a few dollars in that. And then so they went out in Silicon Valley pillaging and, went to uncover it. So it's had all these different lives over the course of 9 years or something. Like it was basically created out of the 2008 financial crisis. Right. While people were occupying Wall Street, they were in their tents on their laptops creating Bitcoin.
Indeed.
So that was 9 years ago, and it's had 3 lives already.
Right. Like, so if you can't tell already, Malcolm and I seem to be skeptical about the value of
No, I believe in it.
You believe in it? Well, the title of this show is Bitcoin BS, and we're going to have a cryptocurrency enthusiast and a professional who actually does this for a living come on the show and kind of semi-debate us to give us a different perspective. But before we do that, another story that I found in preparing for this show, Bitcoin's price increase last year was a bubble, says Ethereum's co-founder Lubin. This was an August 2018 piece on Investopedia.com by Rakisha Sharma. The question was the run-up in Bitcoin's prices last year a bubble? Joseph Lubin, Ethereum's co-founder, Ethereum is like a cryptocurrency. It's one of like the top 3 ones that people know of. Seems to think so. He said as much in an interview with Bloomberg. This is something that we've seen so many times since 2009 when Bitcoin was invented. We've seen rises and falls in cryptocurrency prices, and what many call a bubble, I would agree. Bitcoin's biggest price bubble was back in 2013 when the cryptocurrency registered a phenomenal increase of approximately, get this, 5,992% in 1 year. For context, last year it increased approximately 1,800%. Lubin went on to characterize past bubbles as quote-unquote pimples relative to the growth seen in the cryptocurrency space. So he's saying it's not a big deal by calling it a pimple. Lubin also outlined differences between the dot-com bubble at the turn of the century and Bitcoin's bubble last year. So he compared it. We've compared on this show Bitcoin to the dot-com bubble of the early 2000s, right? So he said in response to that, things were so slow at that time that there was one collapse with steady growth over time, he said, referring to the bust in the internet-related stocks in 2000 and the tech industry's subsequent regeneration. During that time, internet startups without revenues and sound business models were listed on the stock market in order to mop up money from investors. And that was kind of like scheme or what people thought was supposed to work at that time. The dynamics and the pace of cryptocurrency bubble are different, Lubin says. He suggests that a price increase in crypto is generally followed by a build-out of fundamental infrastructure for the technologies and another correction due to investor fears about the future of cryptocurrencies. To me, that sounds similar to what I just said, which was the dot-com bubble of 2000s. Mm-hmm. People mopping up money, so to speak, from investors.
And you never really hear about those people who successfully mopped up the money from the tech crisis.
Indeed. And then he goes on to say here that, well, after there's a correction in the price, more infrastructure is built out to make it even more viable, which doesn't sound correct to me all the way.
Well, I can actually buy that because out of basically every bubble we've had that burst in this country, what ultimately ended up happening is the majority of everybody who jumped in got hurt. They got burned on the way down.
Right.
But what happened is you had 5 to 10 major players in that space who emerged victorious.
Right.
Think Google, Amazon, Netflix, people like that who through the 2000, 2001, 2002 era where they created their companies, they started at the same time as pets.com and dogs.com and cats.com all got blown, by the wayside. But they emerged victorious. Right. And what ultimately ended up happening is widespread trust and widespread use of the internet.
Right.
So the internet becoming a real viable thing happened because of everybody jumping online to try and create the next thing.
Right.
And all of a sudden the internet was this thing that if you didn't know anything about it, you were a loser.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you can't be 6 years old and not be on the internet.
And in that way, it sounds very similar to what's going on in the cryptocurrency
So that's why
space.
I say I think we may be headed for a place where the cryptocurrencies themselves, all of a sudden we forget all about them and we can't even remember that thing with a B that we used to talk about on our show.
Right.
But we do know very well what blockchain is and how it handles our payment processing system or our medical record storage system or whatever else it ultimately gets used for.
Right, and that was one story that was from a co-founder of a cryptocurrency, Joseph Lubin. There was another article that came out like a day or so ago before I wrote this show. The Wolf on Wall Street warns investors of the next big trap. He calls it Bitcoin, or it is Bitcoin. This was the August 2018 CNBC.com piece by Kate Rooney, where the former penny stockbroker Jordan Belfort.
So not Leonardo DiCaprio.
Not Leonardo DiCaprio, but the person he played in the movie Wolf on Wall Street. Spent nearly 2 years in prison for scamming investors. Bitcoin he has no doubt is the next trap that could leave some retail investors penniless, and by retail he means like regular folks who are investing.
Like our friends on Twitter who swear it's the best thing ever.
Indeed. He says, and I quote, "I was a scammer. I had it down to a science, and it's exactly what's happening with Bitcoin," he told CNBC in a recent documentary. "The whole thing is so stupid. These kids have gotten themselves so brainwashed." Belfort ran an over-the-counter brokerage house on Long Island called Stratton Oakmont and pleaded guilty in 1999 to manipulating investors into buying stocks that eventually turned out to be worthless. The former broker's story was depicted by, as we mentioned before, Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese's Wolf on Wall Street. In order to manipulate markets, Belfort highlighted the need for demand. Back in the day, he said, he had an army of people calling around the country and the world persuading to have people buy stocks he would later then dump to profit off of after the value of the stock had risen. In the internet age, the manipulation tactic has become easier. Cryptocurrency fundraising, known as initial coin offerings, in many cases turned out to be frauds and have become the target of the Securities Exchange Commission investigations. Google, Facebook, and Twitter have also outlawed advertising of initial coin offerings on their platform. This thing, he said, is going to evaporate like a mirage. Belfort said, there's a lot of really honest people who are going to get slaughtered. So those are two like perspectives, like somebody who actually co-founded a cryptocurrency and somebody who used to be a scammer,
right?
In the stock space. So we're going to have a guest on the show who's going to try and provide a counter argument to our understanding of the cryptocurrency space. Do you think you can be convinced of otherwise, Malcolm?
I don't know. I think Jordan Belfort is a credible authority that is very tough to question. No, right. Seriously though, when I first saw that interview that prompted me to pull like the story online from CNBC,
right?
As I'm listening to him, immediately I said, well, I've got to consider the source, right? Can I really trust that this guy? It's kind of like Michael Cohen or Paul Manafort lecturing you on money laundering, right? Like, you've got to consider the source first and foremost.
Right.
But there still may be some truth to what they're saying.
Sure.
And so in this, I'm listening to him talking, and he starts going through basically explaining what a pump and dump scheme is.
Right.
And then I start thinking about it, and you've got folks from overseas who are the biggest participants in the Bitcoin wars or the cryptocurrency wars or whatever,
right,
that have made a significant fortune in extracting money from American quote-unquote investors who want to jump in and, ride the wave.
Right.
Meanwhile, they're taking that money out, selling their shares into their current home currency, and running away, into the sunset.
Right.
He may be onto something in that sense, that those people in those other countries who were first to pump up Bitcoin might be the new Stratton Oakmont that, is leaving American Bitcoin holders holding the bag.
Indeed. Well, we're going to get to that. A reminder that this show is called Is Bitcoin BS? A cryptocurrency enthusiast debates MYDM. And we're going to bring that cryptocurrency enthusiast and professional onto the show after this music break. But first, I want to remind you can always catch past episodes of Manager Dan Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Please leave us a review on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch the show. If you have a question for us, send it to us, info@managerdanmoney.com. And of course, you can always catch us on social media. Malcolm, what's your handle?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, mine is at MYDM1. And you can catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/managerdanmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manager Dan Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we are talking about the conversation at hand, which is Bitcoin BS? A cryptocurrency enthusiast debates Manager Dan Money. And I want to introduce our guest, Mr. Samson Williams. He's a partner at Axes and Eggs, a blockchain and cryptocurrency think tank Samson is a partner at this think tank, as I mentioned, that specializes in consulting companies on blockchain, cryptocurrency topics like initial coin offerings, government compliance, and mining cryptocurrencies. He likens the work of he and his colleagues to that of gold miners rushing to find riches in the gold mines of California in the mid-1800s. Samson, welcome to Manage Your Damn Money, sir.
Thank you, Ben. Very happy to be here. Malcolm, very happy to be here as well.
Indeed. Welcome to the show. So we have you here because we are two old, curmudgeonly old men shaking our fist at this thing called cryptocurrency. Can you first explain who you are, what you do, and talk a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, I meet with you fine folks who have questions. I always have to give compliments to people who give me the Fox News Fair and Balanced intro when we're talking about cryptocurrencies. It's like excellent.
Indeed.
And just explain what there's a difference between Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, blockchain and technology, and money laundering.
Right.
So we got to separate those two. You get to hold the money laundering. I'm going to give the Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to Malcolm, and I'll keep the blockchain, and we'll explain how those three work.
I see where this is going. That's hilarious, by the way. So real quick, to explain to me, I want people to understand your work as a professional, because you work in the space, you're an entrepreneur. Can you characterize that a little bit for us?
So we do primarily research and education. And so in that regards of doing research and education, last week we went to Mauritius. If you look at a map of Africa, it's at the bottom to the right next to Madagascar, where we met with the president and his economic advisors, because they're looking at something called digital transformation. And so in this chapter of digital transformation, blockchain and cryptocurrencies plays a huge part of that. And so part of that is, as a nation state, how are they looking at this technology? Because they're a tiny little country at the bottom of Africa, but they want to compete on a global scale. So understanding that they lack drug dealers, sex traffickers, and money launderers in Mauritius, how are they going to leverage the tech? And so on a day-to-day basis, we introduce how this technology works, explain it to government officials, C-suite executives, so they can have a fair and balanced view of how they should regard blockchain technology.
Indeed.
So are you guys looking primarily out of the United States, just in general?
Oh yeah, we don't actually do any business in the U.S.
Smart.
Just because, well, the U.S. doesn't have the leadership required to embrace this level of technology.
Interesting.
So if you look at I'm an e-resident of Estonia. I spend most of my time in Dubai, because outside of the States, they're looking at what the U.S. did for the internet with Silicon Valley, and they don't want to wait for us to develop that technology. They say, you guys figure out whatever you're doing on Twitter today. We're going to develop this technology. We'll let you catch up.
You over here sub-tweeting and sub-commenting. We talked about this really quickly off camera before the show started. How'd you get into the blockchain cryptocurrency space?
I used to work for a small company called Fannie Mae as their emergency manager. In 2008, they had an emergency. So
I wonder what that could be.
I wonder what that could be. So I showed up to do emergency management for 90 days. That 90-day contract turned into 8 years. And while I was there, it was a long emergency. So while I was there, I not only learned about finance, mortgage finance, but also operations and technology. And our CISO told me to wear better socks, get on LinkedIn and buy some Bitcoin. So I did those three things, and that's how I got into the space in 2014.
Interesting. So your company, Axes and Eggs, is quote unquote think tank.
Yeah.
What the heck does that mean? And explain to like a person, like, 'cause think tanks are like, I don't know what they do all the time. So tell us what you do as a think tank.
Mostly it's research.
Okay.
So our motto is we answer the questions you can't Google.
Right.
Because if you can Google it, well, you don't need a think tank.
Right.
And so part of that is getting smart people. Maureen Murat, she's a brilliant lawyer. Dr. Tiffany Gray, she's a doctorate of public health, to say, how do we answer this question? Because we don't answer questions about the past. We're looking towards the future. We're building towards the future, which is why when we do work, most of it is abroad, because in the US, we're stuck in a bit of a quagmire. Everyone else is saying, how do we be competitive to US firms?
Right.
How do we step up our game locally and then globally? So we do research primarily, executive education, so a little bit of policy work. Right. And that, again, it goes back to This has never been done before. We can't Google the answer. How do we do it?
Okay. Now, in simple terms, you alluded to it before in terms of separating out the money laundering from the Bitcoin.
That's yours.
From the blockchain. From the blockchain. Explain to us the delineation between blockchain technology, which sometimes seems to get lost in the hullabaloo of cryptocurrency. Like, what's the difference between the two, and help us understand that, and why maybe Malcolm and I are focusing on the wrong thing here.
No, you're not focusing on the wrong thing. I think it's great that you're having this conversation. We're going to go back to the internet, that thing called the internet. Initially, when the internet was deployed, 1963, like 5 people used it. Right. Fast forward 30 years later into the early 90s, now it's like, oh my God, the internet, it's such a great place for porn. That's it. And so the internet, porn dominated the internet. People didn't know how to differentiate this. Right. We take it for granted because, we have the internet on our phone. So it's like, oh, we have the history of the world in the palm of our hands. Most of the time we're just using it for Snapchat. Right. And so when you think of how the internet evolved, initially it was only porn is on the internet. It's still probably 50% of the traffic. This is just a true quote. And so blockchain, when people think blockchain, they think cryptocurrencies. Right. It turns out you can actually do a lot more with the internet than surf for porn. In blockchain, the easiest, simplest way to use blockchain technology, distributed ledger technology, is cryptocurrencies. Right. It's literally cut and paste code, and so it takes you maybe 6-7 minutes to actually make a new currency. What you alluded to it earlier, where you had the adoption of Bitcoin, where Mt. Gox and Silk Road, where you could buy anything, right? On Silk Road, you could buy anything that you wanted, illegal or not. And so we've had to switch the idea of where we think of fiat or government issued currency to these things called cryptocurrencies. They're built on this technology called blockchain, and we can exchange cryptocurrencies for goods, for services, for value. So it's been proven it works as a currency. That's not even a debate. What hasn't been proven is how are governments going to regulate it, tax it, and how are they going to in some way govern it? Okay. And that's where the blockchain technology, when we'll talk about it in a moment, that's going to blow your mind.
Okay. So a question that I have, kind of a question. So I understand the use case for cryptocurrency outside of the United States, in the sense that I am a merchant in a remote part of the world that's not connected to everybody else, like Swaziland, right?
Yep.
You want to use a country in Africa. So I'm a merchant there. I want to do business internationally, but people don't trust my home currency for a host of different reasons. And cryptocurrency is the thing that allows me to do business with another merchant in China, or another merchant in Texas, or another merchant in South Africa, wherever. And that's going to be the thing that binds us together, that makes people trust now that I am able to give them payment for the goods and services that we agreed upon. The question I have for you then is, what is to stop a Square or a PayPal or anyone else in that space from dominating that and solving that equation far sooner than it takes for people to accept cryptocurrency as the thing that's going to do that? Because that's already tried and true. Yeah. People already believe in it. People already, I've got Zelle on basically every bank account I have. They're like, please sign up and use Zelle because we trust him and he's going to do all of the work. So what do you guys see as the advantage to using cryptocurrency in that space if I could also just use one of these payment systems that also is able to convert that money into dollars very quickly and let me move on?
So actually it's helpful if we explain a little bit how blockchain works, right? Super complicated. You guys ever been on a group text message?
Yes.
Right?
Unfortunately.
Right? So you got like 20, 50, 100 people. Some have names, you see it's Ben. Some have just phone numbers. And it's like, I don't know who that person is. And so Ben has $100. So we all see this on the group text message. Hey, Ben has $100. He gives me 50. We know Ben still only has 50 left. Right. I give you 25. So in this group text message,
we're seeing a chain.
Right. It's a ledger. Okay. Right? It's distributed because it's on each of our phones, as well as the other 200 or 300 people or 20 people in the group text message. So it's a distributed ledger. What makes it immutable is Ben can't say he still has $100 because everyone has seen him give me 50 and me give you 25. Right. And so you have a distributed immutable ledger of transactions and records. At a high level, that's how blockchain works. It's where I am sitting in Africa, in Swaziland, and I want to send a payment to India.
Right.
Okay. One, I can see on the ledger that this wallet has that much money
In it.
which is super helpful. And so when you send it to me, it leaves the wallet and now it's in my wallet. Everyone else on the network can see this at the same time. And so when you think about blockchain as a group text message, it's like, oh yeah, that's really simple. What's the big deal about? In this money transfer, where's the bank? That's where the big deal is. That's where the Zelles of the world, the Banks of America, they're like, this is the worst expletive idea in the world. Because technology has engineered them out of the process. So they can't charge you the fees. So let me tell you about this black magic called blockchain. Only drug dealers and money launderers like Ben use this technology. It's evil because I can't charge you fees if I don't exist. And so blockchain, it removes intermediaries, incumbents. And so it's not that it's magic, it's just a way of structuring data so that in that group text message, you know who has what money. Imagine if this was 2007 and we had a transaction of all mortgages. And we could see who had what mortgages at what time. We couldn't have the crisis of 2008.
Interesting.
And that's why this is presumably. This is why this is some deep, dark black magic, and we should never, ever use it, except for Ben for money laundering.
Indeed.
So, really quickly though, on that same page, I completely appreciate and agree with you with the first charge, which is the bank shouldn't be able to charge me to send $5 to my friend. They shouldn't even necessarily be in the position to have to know that I sent $5 to my friend. The flip side to that is nobody's in charge. That's where you lose me. So the idea of we are all in this together, we are all equals in this, sounds a little bit hokey. Sounds like something Elizabeth Warren would have written a paper on in college. It doesn't really convince me that I should trust it because I know this is completely anti-millennial thinking, but if nobody's in charge, how do I know I can trust this system? Somebody's got to be able to guarantee me that when I send that dollar to Ben, if he decides to turn around and send me $1 6 months later, it's still going to be there. He's still going to be able to do that. He's not going to create, what's the word I'm looking for? He's not going to be able to create fake dollars and send them to me later. I'm going to know that dollar he sent to me is a legitimate dollar. That's the challenge that I see for it, is how do I verify that it's a real thing if everybody's equals and nobody's in charge?
So we're going to go back to that group text message, right? And so the way the cryptography works, a new Bitcoin is released every 10 minutes or so. And so the miners help settle transactions. Miners are people who are doing computations to validate the key, right? So it's like, okay, brilliant. We have this group text message. You can't go back and make up new money. So we know, okay, Ben's got this money. It's called the double spin. You can't go back and change it. Why? It's on this group text message where all the miners have it. It's that immutable record. So you can't just make up new money. In the States, when we want to make up new money, or when the governments want to make up new money, they used to have to go find more ink and more paper. Nowadays, it's digital. So you just move the decimal over, and ta-da, billions of dollars has been created out of thin air. And so this is where you're saying no one's in charge. Part of it is the technology behind it, the cryptography. It helps give us confidence in it. And you can see all of the transactions. So for money launderers like Ben, who are laundering money on a blockchain, on a Bitcoin blockchain, we can see all of his transactions. It is literally the fastest ticket to jail if you do that.
Ben, please don't flip on me when you get caught.
Because again, this group text message, we can see all the transactions. So don't launder money on your Bitcoin blockchain.
Right, that's an amazing analogy, and I've never heard it explained in that way, and it makes it clear. We've been having an extremely esoteric conversation about what blockchain is, but just kind of going back to the top level, you've kind of explained it as the text message. How do you see blockchain technology affecting like our day-to-day financial things that we do, and even other spaces like Malcolm mentioned, healthcare? How do you see it changing that?
The United Nations, everybody knows the United Nations, I assume. So they have their Sustainable Development Goals. Right now, I'm the chair for Blockchain for Impact. It's a partner agency with the UN. The UN has 15 different blockchain pilots going on right now, and everything from remittance, sending money back throughout countries, to identifications, to medical records. And at the end of the day, it's that group text message where you're tracking transactions. So now that if I put Ben's ID on a blockchain ID, I know who he is. I can attach his medical records, his health records, his the fact that he didn't take geography in the first grade, right? I can attach it all to this.
Right.
Because I always know this is him, because no one can go back on that group ledger and change it.
And Equifax doesn't get to hold this information, right?
And Equifax doesn't get to hold this information.
Just making sure.
You do have public blockchains and private blockchains. So Equifax will be looking to roll out a private blockchain.
No, thank you.
Because no, to your point, blockchain technology is not new. Bank of America has probably 43 patents on it. JP Morgan Chase has had over 150 patents denied. So the banks and the financial systems, they know this technology exists, but would you implement a technology that gets rid of you?
Right.
No, it's like the worst idea ever. They're on the moment of being Ubered, because the taxi cab commissions, they could have bought Uber when it was pennies, but they said, no, that's stupid. Who would ever call a car with your phone?
Right.
And so they got Ubered.
So really quickly, while you're on that, just throwing it out there into the conversation, since it's gotten extremely intellectual, and you've given me an opening to nerd out on this. The place, to your point though, that I do see it actually transforming the way banks do their business is not necessarily with us and our ability to send money to each other, but it's the other side of the balance sheet where they're transferring assets. So you've got stock transactions that normally would take 2 days to complete, because my back office has to talk to your back office, and part of that conversation is this trade legitimate? Is this person the owner of this stock? Back and forth. It takes that out of it. So that distributed ledger between all of the banks that do trade with each other on Wall Street would ultimately make it so that those trades process within an hour versus 2 or 3 days.
Probably
that, I think, is probably why, like you said, everybody's antsy to put their hat in the ring and fill all these patents to be the one holding that ultimate technology that allows them to trade with each other that way. But that also doesn't take away from their ability to charge us mortgage initiation fees or $15 a month account fees or whatever.
Mind your damn money. You're going to go buy a house, right? I hate this. It drives me nuts. You do a title search. It's like, what expletive am I doing a title search?
Right.
Why can't we put this on a group text message so that this is Samson's house? Samson has owned it for the last 20 years. Ben is going to buy it. Instead, you pay $3,000 to $7,000 for a title search. Why don't we eliminate that person, eliminate that need, because it's on that it can be a public ledger or a private ledger that says I own it, now Ben's buying it.
So, I mean, you're doing a great job of making me feel like I'm converting a little bit into what you're talking about. I have one question. Bitcoin, which is the grandfather, so to speak, of all cryptocurrencies, was created by this fictional unknown character with the last name
Satoshi
Nakamura.
Nakamoto.
Yes, that.
Satoshi, just call him Satoshi.
How do I know, and this is like the one question, whether it's blockchain, whether it's, a certain particular cryptocurrency, how do I know that person who created that thing didn't create themselves a backdoor to then suck the value out of it at some future point 20 years from now and leave everyone broke? How do I know that?
The lights.
You can go on bitcoin.org, check all the code. You can go on GitHub, check all the code. And so Satoshi did a great thing. I liken him to Jonas Salk. Jonas Salk created the polio vaccine, but he didn't patent it. He lost out on, it's like $8 billion. He's like, oh, I cured polio. Here, everybody, take it.
Right.
Amazing things for humanity. And so when we look at Bitcoin as a blockchain, there are many blockchains. Bitcoin just happens to be the first blockchain. And so Satoshi's like, here's something you guys can use to do peer-to-peer transactions that eliminate intermediaries and middlemen, like banks, and they think that's a bad idea. And so they're pushing back on it. The reason we have blockchain is because the 2008 financial crisis. It's not like it was like, oh man, this is great. Wall Street gets bailed out, Main Street gets screwed. We should just deal with it. Someone, while you said they were protesting for Occupy Wall Street, they were banging on their signs. Satoshi was like, let me write some code. Because that's the problem he was trying to address. And so cryptocurrency in particular, they're a customer service battle between banks and regular people.
Interesting. When you put it that way, I'm like, So final question before we wrap up the show. You've kind of pivoted my own perspective on what I need to be looking at. Let's say someone is a regular person who saved up $10,000 and they're ready to like do something to grow their money. What would you suggest that they know or understand about cryptocurrencies, and then separately from that about blockchain and what's coming ahead for them, for someone who's in that position?
Do your research. I don't give investor advice because I'm not a investor advisor, and Maureen would come off of camera and beat me up if I said so. So I give you an example of, it's March 10th, 2000, the dot-com bubble burst. So all of the pet.coms, dog.coms, they go away. Amazon is at $5.85 a share, $5.85 a share. Right now it's like $1,800. It took 18 years for it to get to $1,800. Right. People think that technology is amazing and it evolves overnight. When you look at the phone, the brick phone, right?
That's all sports agents had.
Yeah, you could only talk on it. Right. Now it's like, I don't want to ever talk to anybody on my phone. Amen. And so when the internet got rolled out in the early 1990s, we couldn't talk about it because the internet didn't exist. Right. And still the penetration of internet within black communities and brown communities is still not there. The difference is nowadays when we're talking about blockchain as the internet 3.0, we can talk about it. We're aware of it. And so yes, you will see the price fluctuate because much like in the dot-com era, some eggs had to be broken to make cake. We're in that process of making cake. And so when you're looking at what should I be looking at to invest in or what to do, you should really just educate yourself about cryptocurrencies, blockchain, money laundering, and focus on the fact that cryptocurrencies are here to stay. The banks will have to compete with them. Blockchain, the technology, will be the infrastructure of the future. And so if you're a small business, if you're looking to go into business, how can you use the technology to grow your business? Because it's a battle of customer service, and customers want better, faster, cheaper business solutions on their phone.
Right, indeed. Well, that's an excellent way to wrap up the show, Samson. Why don't you tell people really quickly if they want to learn more about you or your work, where can they go?
My name is Samson Williams. If you Google me, Samson Williams, my information pops up, samsonwilliams.com. You can find out information about Axes and Eggs at axesandeggs.com. That's axesandeggs.com. And you can follow me on the Instagram and the Twitters at HustleFundBaby. And me and Malcolm are now going to go off the camera and gang up on you some more.
Indeed. Well, Samson, thank you for coming on Manage Your Damn Money, where we do not do money laundering. I want to make that clear. Of course, you can always catch past.
No proof.
It would be proof it was in a group text message.
No collusion.
We want to remind people you can always catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Please leave us a review, even on this really high-minded, esoteric show, and just let us know how good of a job we're doing. If you have a question or comment, or you want Malcolm to answer a question of yours on his Malcolm's Money Minute, send us the question, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can also, of course, catch us on the gram or Twitter. Malcolm, what's your handle?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, mine is at MYDM1. And you can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. Of course, thanks to our partners here at Montgomery Community Media for yet another fun and entertaining show. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.